Can't
All right, Hampton, welcome to the pod. How are you doing?
Doing well. Happy to be here. Appreciate you having me
Dude.
on.
Thanks for coming on. Let's get right into it. If you had one sentence to sum up yourself, one sentence bio, what would it be?
One sentence. I would say,
Just for our
let's
audience,
see.
to get us going.
Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah. I would say like in a sentence or just a few words, like continuously reinventing, and interested in a lot of different things. So probably context behind that. I think, you know, for a lot of people our age, the whole financial crisis thing, you watched people get laid off, you watched just a lot of stuff happen. And so top of mind throughout my career has always been like, how do I stay nimble? How do I pivot? How do I just be interested in a bunch of different stuff so that if one day I can't do the thing that I've always done, I can make a pretty seamless pivot to anything else. I know it was more than one sentence, but had to provide some context
Okay,
there.
so I love it. I love the word pivot. We'll get into that. That's going to be a question later on. So for the audience, not that the audience cares, but Hampton and I care. Hampton and I went to a military school called the Citadel. It's where we met. I think we were both in the same class, shooting spitballs at the ceiling or something. And
Yep.
so I want to get into you mentioned how do you go from an institution, the Citadel, to moving towards a goal and like kind of hopping into a completely new domain that you mentioned in a call we had maybe a couple of days ago. So I want to break down that. So how does someone go from, oh, I'm not in this space, but I need to get in this space. How do I get into that space and dominate?
Yeah. Yeah. An institution's a great way to describe the Citadel. You come out of there pretty institutionalized. And I think that's important because, a lot of colleges, provided you don't, aside from going to like maybe a big state school where there's just a bunch of different people and you have the opportunity to interact with a bunch of different people. If you go to maybe like a small liberal arts school or a school like the Citadel where it's pretty homogenous, you just meet a certain group of people and then you come out and you're like, oh wow, there's just a bunch of different types of people out here running around the world. So you're kind of hit in the face pretty quickly with having to navigate all these different personality types. Now, fortunately, in a place like the Citadel, there was the teaching of leadership and navigating those different personality types. So yeah, while there weren't that many different types, like you were kind of aware of it going out. And so that brings me to the point of, how do you realize, so if you like, how do you keep from getting pigeonholed? I think is a great way to describe this. So I graduated from the Citadel and I wanted to go into the military, but I got disqualified for asthma. So I went and I was going to go to law school. I had a pretty stacked resume for law school, and then just decided the week before I was supposed to take the LSAT that I just really didn't want to do this. And I was just doing it because I thought that it was a logical next step. So I did what any political science undergrad did. I went and worked in politics afterward. I worked on a U.S. Senate race and then worked in D.C. for a little while doing energy and environmental policy, and then did economic development back in West Virginia, where I'm from. And really, it was like 2015. I knew pretty early on that I didn't want to do that forever, because get to our point, like I would be meeting with lobbyists, which are not the big, bad, scary people that you would think they are. Obviously, there's like a spectrum of lobbyist people that like there's the RV association where they would give you like s'more skewers and just invite you to parties and educate you on like issues affecting the RV industry. And then there's, of course, like the heavy hitter lobbyists that come in with a little more doom and gloom, but they're really not like carrying bags of money around. It's like they know about subjects that I don't know about. But as part of that, I saw these people in their like late 30s, early 40s, maybe late 40s, who had been lobbying on the Hill for however long. And man, it just kind of seemed like you were very, you were just, like your whole career depended on the winds of the day, right? Like are your friends in power or are they not? And if they're not, then you have to go like peddle your wares to some 23-year-old like me at the time who was just not that interested in what you had to say. And I can't imagine how frustrating that would be to be in your mid 40s, listening to this, like watching some kid who's like probably not even taking notes, knowing like my boss doesn't care about this issue and we're just going to put your paperwork in the recycling bin, but like your job is to just check the box. So pretty early on, I knew I didn't want to go that route. And spending a lot of time back in West Virginia, looking at like economic development, what makes like a community pop? Why does Austin, Texas do so well when Charleston, West Virginia doesn't? I mean, there's a bunch of reasons, but like, what are those reasons other than like obvious ones? So I kind of figured out like I need to go to business school. And so the big pivot here was I was studying I started studying for the GMAT, which is I don't even know what it stands for, but it's like whatever. It's the admissions test for business school. And it's like half verbal, half math. The verbal section, like I barely even studied for it because I was a pretty good writer coming out of school. And then the math section, I remember looking at it and I just like couldn't even do it. And I couldn't do any of it, like any of it. and so I just remember sitting there at like a coffee shop in Eastern Market in DC, looking at this thing being like, okay, well, I was just really bummed out. And so I think I went to like a liquor store afterward or something because it was a Friday, but I was like sitting there, just like either I can learn how to do math in general, or I can just like hate my job forever and be like, just let myself get pigeonholed into what I'm doing. And so I think, sorry, this is long. I mean, this is long winded, but I think the key there is you're like, okay, what are the things keeping me from pivoting into the goals that I have or the place where I want to be? And then how do I just identify them and break them into small parts and then just tackle each one? Like if I were just like, I need to learn math, right, that's pretty daunting. But when I break it down, luckily I had test exam books, but it was figuring out how to take the test. Because it was very much a test that tested how well you could recognize patterns. And it wasn't about math, it was about patterns. So that was the cool thing about the GMAT and thing to like look at in life is like recognizing patterns is way more useful to you than just learning brute force subject matter. So I got pretty good at recognizing patterns in these math equations, and you have to be able to do them quickly. So it was just breaking down the different types of questions. They weren't necessarily by like exponents or divisions or division multiplication, whatever. It was by like certain sequences. And then I think there's a metaphor there in life, just recognizing patterns. And there's not to segue into this, but there's an investor, Ray Dalio, who talks a lot about like pattern recognition and and if you can recognize patterns, then you'll be able to adapt.
That's his principles, right? I mean, I feel like that's kind of like what his principles book was about, was just like recognizing those patterns. And I feel like Charlie Munger in the same way. I mean, the dude talks about mental models all day. He's just like, oh, this is an example of inversion, or this is an example of, he takes concepts from engineering or math or whatever. So when you were studying, when you were breaking it down, like in the daily schedule, what did you find? What was like on a daily level, how did you crush the math work? What worked for you?
Yeah. In the evenings, I would try to tackle it. And I think what helped me was just every day thinking like, I don't want to do this anymore.
It'll be over as soon as
I was just working at politics. Yeah, as soon as I like get the score that I need to get, then I'm a free man. But tackling, I mean, I think it was bursts. So this is an interesting thing that I picked up on while I was doing this, but then also I started to become really interested in how people learn and how to learn more efficiently. And there's a great book called Ultra Learning. What's his name? It's something. Is it Scott Young?
Heard about it, but I haven't read it.
Here on my shelf. Scott Ultra Learning by Scott Young, and it's a great book. Or you could just look up any podcast that he's been on, and that's basically it. But a lot of these books are like that. They go pitch the book, and then you listen to the podcast, and you read the book, and you're like, I basically knew everything about
it. That's a hack. I need to do that, dude. I don't do that.
Yeah. Do that like the Challenger sale, same deal. He wrote like 4 articles on Harvard Business Review. I read all 4 of them and then read the book, and I was like, basically
What's that
got
called?
everything.
Challenger sales?
Challenger sale methodology. It's like a very data driven approach to enterprise
Love it.
sales. But it's really good. It's one of the best. That and believe it or not, Jordan Belfort's
dude,
book is one of the best
Wolf, the
sales
Way of
books
the
I've
Wolf,
read.
or no, is that it? Straight
Yeah,
line?
yeah.
Yeah.
This whole straight line selling methodology. Yeah, it's super technical, which I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a lot of like
Yeah, I thought it was
Grant
gonna be
Cardone.
fluff.
Yeah, that's right. I will disparage Grant Cardone on here. I don't care, but it'll be like a bunch of smoke and mirrors. But no, it was
Yeah.
like very technical, like walking through. Yeah, it was very
All
good.
right, where were we?
But ultra learning. So how did I do it every day? It was like short bursts and rapid feedback loops. And I didn't realize it until years later when I read Ultra Learning, because I was studying for the Chartered Financial Analyst exam and trying to get more efficient at it. But Ultra Learning talks about like these rapid feedback loops help you retain information. And then when I was working at Dell and coaching these sales reps, one of them said they really like how we would do these quizzes, and the questions were designed to be like things that would come up in conversation. So you could just have them on rapid recall, so you could make more room to remember other stuff as opposed to just these like facts that you just need to know. And one of the reps, she said that she really liked how we gave the answer immediately after the question and explained it, because then that helped with retention. And so point is, instead of doing like a whole 30 question problem set or whatever, I would do groups of 5 or groups of 2, and I would break it down like why I got them wrong, and then have like an error log of what were the common themes of the questions I got.
I love that. I love rapid feedback. I mean, I think we all kind of intuitively discover that, like with language. Like I feel like I'm pretty competent at language learning. I know French, I know English really well. Like, yeah, I don't want to brag to our listeners, but I know English. But yeah, I feel like rapid feedback. Like even earlier today, I was playing piano, and as soon as I know where the mistake is when I hit the wrong key, cool. That's the point of failure. That's now the complete focus. I need to go from where I knew the chords to the point of failure, and then just focus there, get that down, and then keep going. Like, and if you've ever listened to any Andrew Huberman, he talks about the same thing. He's like, you don't learn without making mistakes, because when you make a mistake, it sends off these chemicals that make you pay attention, and then you pay attention, you know where the error is, and then you learn. Like, it's all necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And creating an error log, I think, is really important, because it kind of forces you to, like, I mean, honestly, stick your nose in it, but you gotta like really think about what was I doing wrong. It's what your
dad would want, what our dads would want us to do. Like, here's what you did wrong. Like, then they tell you, you're like, that's a good point. Like, just dwell
on it.
Look at it at night in your room alone in the dark. Just like, this is my Excel spreadsheet of my 30 errors today.
Yep, exactly. But I imagine, I mean, if you did that in life, I mean, gosh, I don't know how healthy that is, but you can imagine how much better you would get at not making.
They call them postmortems.
Mistakes over and over.
Like, that's what a postmortem is when, like, how did we fail the battle? And then other people do premortems. How will this fail? How could this fail? And let's go ahead and shore up how it could fail. So, like, I know with my day, I'm like, I know how it's going to fail. I'm going to eat a ton of food about midday and get really sleepy. That's where it keeps failing. So I either need to eat less food or not eat until I've finished all my work, or I got to figure out something, because I know I'm I work from home. I have my schedule is my own. So I have to know the points of failure, because there's no external feedback other than failure in life. So like,
yeah. And just, I think the rise of all the like wearable technologies definitely help with more of those feedback loops for your body and stuff, right? Like sleep and heart rate monitors, being able to log your meals, like with MyFitnessPal, because you may not realize why you're like, it kind of makes total sense right now, but like if you drink coffee right when you wake up, this could be just on average for most people, but if you drink coffee right when you wake up, you'll probably be tired again at say noon. Whereas if you can just power through it and then drink coffee at like 10 or 11, like I found that I would drink maybe 3 or 4 cups of coffee if I drank one right when I woke up, versus if I just had 1 cup of coffee around noon after just letting myself wake up, then I
love that. I got that from Huberman too. And I'm not trying to plug Huberman or be a podcast cowboy, but I got that from him too. Like now I don't drink coffee until several hours into the day. and try to get some direct sunlight right in the morning. So, okay. All right. So we're at Pivot. Let me look around, see where we are. I love this. Okay. Let's talk about West Virginia. What's going on with that? Talk about economic development in rural states. What do you see? Tell us something we do not know.
Yeah. And I think hopefully this isn't, I mean, maybe I've been drowning in this stuff for a while, so hopefully it's not just common knowledge at this point, but I think, with the whole rise of remote work, I mean, before that, there was a bit of, and I find like the world, again, goes back to these going in cycles, right? Like we're dense and then we're spread out, and then we're dense and we're spread out. You see it in a lot of things like computing and other things, where it's like distributed and then it's centralized and it's distributed. But as things it gets like stronger. So as time goes on, it becomes like a better version of what it used to be. And so I think work is becoming, so it's kind of like double-edged. So right when all the remote work stuff started happening, I was a big proponent of it. And now, like, I don't know how I feel about remote work. Like I work remote. I really wish that I were in the same room as the team that I work with. Because we just, the feedback loop there is is so fast. But either way, I mean, there are just a ton of jobs where you're just kind of an individual contributor, and you just don't need rapid
it doesn't even need to be synchronous. It could be asynchronous.
I think, yeah. And so I think this is going to be a big boon for a lot of states like West Virginia, where there's just not enough critical mass to locate satellite offices of major employers or like knowledge workers. So you have these different, and even then, I mean, you could have co-working spaces where different individual contributors from different places can go and they can knowledge share. Like I'm a member of Startup Virginia, which is it's a co-working space down in downtown Richmond. I live in Richmond, Virginia right now for other personal reasons. Would love to get back to West Virginia, but long story short, for the listeners out there, I'm getting married in October. Met a girl who's a Virginian, and so I'm like more stuck in it for a little while, but we'll see. I might. Hey, she may have won the battle, but I might win the war.
Talk about getting married. Talk about rapid feedback coming your way.
Yeah, exactly. It's very rapid. But anyway, so I rather than getting into the weeds and rambling, because I have a tendency to do that. But so in terms of states like West Virginia, I think have a real opportunity here to capitalize on the distribution of knowledge workers that can now work remote. And then the key here will be, how do you keep them engaged? How do you make them feel like they have a sense of community? Because it's very easy to feel isolated when you're a remote worker. And then how do you make them feel like they have career mobility as they progress throughout their careers? Like that's a concern, that you leave the office and you go take a chance by moving to kind of the economic middle of nowhere. Not denying it.
It's not San Francisco.
What happens if you need another job? Like, are you stuck in this job forever, or can you find another like progressive office role or something, or some kind of other, can you keep moving your career forward, or are you stuck in this one role who will let you work remote? So I think the key is just supporting those workers. But there's a lot of work going into that in West Virginia. So before this, I was working in investment banking, and then switched to be head of operations for a startup that is based out of West Virginia. And that's, we're very connected to Vantage Ventures, which is funded by John Chambers, who was the CEO of Cisco, Brad Smith, who was the CEO of Intuit, current president of Marshall University. He's very active. He created the Ascend program, which has provided a lot of the infrastructure I just talked about with remote workers. They give them a community. They take them on like kayaking trips, mountain climbing trips, hiking trips. It gives people like, hey, it's not like, hey, move to West Virginia, good luck. It's, hey, move to West Virginia. Here's a group of friends that you can get to know. And I think they give you like $10,000 to move there.
Group?
For anybody. Cool. Anybody who's a remote employee that wants to move to West Virginia, you can apply and you'll get, I think, $10,000 over 2 years. All you have to do is just participate in the program and get to know people. And I think they're coming on their first cohort, and it'll be interesting to see the retention like 1 to 5 year retention metrics, but
and the
so
relationships
far it seems to
that
be
come
pretty
out
successful.
of it, like, does it spawn future two founders who've come together and known each other from kayaking at Ascend? That'll be an interesting long-term experiment. That's like Hampton, dude. There's a guy named Sam Parr who sold his company, The Hustle, but he has something called Hampton, and it's where founders can get together and basically, it's called you. It's called your name. And I just pieced that together. You were like, what?
Oh. I was like,
no, I'm not making
this up.
No, I wish.
What is this?
But it's basically founders, because like founders can get very lonely if you don't know anybody else who's kind of an entrepreneur who has a certain amount of revenue. It can be a lonely place because the complaints you have and the problems you have, other people are just gonna like denigrate. Like, oh, you don't know where to put 3 million cash. That's like, other people are just not gonna understand that problem. Or, oh, you can't make payroll for 200 employees. Well, I don't like my job. Like, it's just a different kind of level of problems. So Ascend sounds kind of like that.
Yeah.
In a way, in terms of helping people not
for more employees. Like, I don't know if they have any startup founders as part of it. Be interesting to see, but I know they have employees of what would be considered startups that are members.
It's not good for humans to be lonely. That's why I go to a coffee shop most days.
I've got like a 2 or 3 screen setup right here, so it's kind of hard for me to leave. But it's always good. Oh man, until I had to switch to a Mac for work. Like, I had an Alienware keyboard, I'm not a gamer at all. I had like an Alienware keyboard, mechanical keyboard, lit up. Like, I'm an Excel wizard. I have like my screens. Yeah, but
you kind of skid over this thing. You're like, I was in iBanking for a while, blah blah blah, and I want to go there for a minute. So I have a particular interest in iBanking because I bombed out of like 3 different iBanking interviews right after school, and I was laughed out. I was laughed out of the room.
I remember
was in New York, I was in Chicago, I was in Houston, and for interviews. Don't worry, I didn't get the jobs, and I'm so glad I didn't. But that's what a loser always says. Anyway, they laughed me out, and they had like all these questions, like they had all these accounting questions and different Excel questions. Bomb those. And did you have the question about the ping pong balls and the airplane? Was that a question?
How many ping pong balls do you fit in an airplane?
They like what?
No, so I didn't. I think that's because sometimes those are. So I'll say part of the reason why you probably quote unquote, in your words, bombed out. And I'll say, I remember you going through that. Well, I remember you going through that and me thinking like, well, I'm not even going to try to get into that industry. But like anything like this, it's just learning how to do it. Like, I have a book. It's like the Mergers and Inquisitions 400. It's 400 investment banking questions that I think like 200, some of them are technical. The rest of them are behavioral that you can kind of figure out if you have common sense. But the truth is, like, you just need to, there's an answer to all those questions. And if you get asked 10 questions in an investment banking interview, 9 of them are going to be from that book. And so that's what people do. They just memorize the book and then they go in there and it's this like theater of answering questions. But I didn't get the ping pong one because I interviewed for an associate position. You were probably interviewing for analyst.
Yeah.
And so for associates, they ask you more like strategic rather than like, are you capable of thinking and doing like some ping pong ball.
Yeah, they were like, can you show up to the interview without a coffee stain on your shirt and then answer our ping pong? Like, I went to a Starbucks right before the interview and they handed me my cup and they handed it to me and they just basically squeezed the cup and poured it onto my shirt. And I was just walking downtown Chicago with like coffee on my shirt right before the interview. And I'm like, I was so not ready for the real world. It's hilarious. Like, the experience totally changes now because now I try to be like super prepared for stuff and think ahead and then not pick things that I think are not actually going to be any fun anyway. So like there's all kinds of learnings that happen from that. Anyway, okay, but I don't want to get stuck in the interview phase. I just think it's hilarious.
No, I'm curious. What do you remember? What banks
actually
you interviewed
do
at,
not desire to say. I think very highly of them, but I've just learned not to mention names ever. And that way,
don't mention names.
I have positive vibes, and I think highly of everyone I've ever dealt with, and I appreciate the opportunity.
There we go.
I try not to burn
No, it's a
the
good
world
call.
down. But I wanted to say, like, what?
I love the
Say it
discipline of this
again,
podcast. I said I love the discipline of this
bro.
podcast. It was a good call.
I just want to be positive
Just
vibes,
don't
high
mention names.
signal, low noise. Like I'm trying. But I wanted to say, like, what's like one,
Mm-hmm.
like, what's one great deal you worked on, or something where you learned a ton, and you were like excited to work about one deal, and you can leave out whatever details you need, but just kind of maybe walk us through some cool deal that you enjoyed.
Yeah. So this one's public because it closed. I worked on, so I was at Harris Williams. I don't know if I mentioned because I loved my experience at Harris Williams. Like the only reason I left is because I even told them this when I left, is that I had a clear set of things I would leave for, and it was like a startup where I would be getting in early, and it would be like have a connection to West Virginia, because it was something like I cared about more than just like the product. It had at least, and this thing checked all those boxes, so I had to go. But I'd probably still be at Harris Williams if it weren't for that. I was in the healthcare M&A group, and one I worked on was medical knowledge group. That one was very cool. I worked on another one, but the other one was a cross border. It was a international pharmaceutical services company called Pharmalex. It closed, so that I can say that. But that one was very cool because it was like, I remember going through the data room of that one, and it was just like a bunch of different languages, and it's kind of cool getting to pop open the hood of these companies and see like just what all the stuff you wouldn't even think of, like what goes into.
What do they do? What does Pharmalex do?
Yeah. So I'm going to stick with medical knowledge group, because that was one where like I don't know, I really like the Pharmalex crew, but medical knowledge group was the first one I was on, and I really like the executive team there. So what they do, and this is pretty cool. So all these, when you think about, so pharmaceutical companies, each drug is like a startup, right? Like it may or may not work. They have full-time staff for them, but they're a lot of the services they will contract out, because you don't want to like hire a bunch of people to do like regulatory work or necessarily even marketing for the drug, because it could flame out, it could not hit FDA approval. So you just don't want to bring all these people on. So they do work with a lot of contractors. So what Medical Knowledge Group did is, for some of these rare disease drugs, like I won't go into the names, but like they will like some of these rare disease drugs, like for migraines, it's only a small subset of the population that really needs these, and only a small subset of physicians that prescribe.
What's small in this case?
And small, I mean, probably it depends on the drug, but like between tens and thousands or hundreds and thousands. But you think of that in the scheme of like millions of people, they're pretty small and pretty targeted. Like it could be rare cancer drugs, things like that. So what they do is they used data, without getting into the details, they would do like data-driven targeting. It's not really targeting, but they would use data to figure out, based off, because all these like it's all anonymized, but so let me just be clear, all very anonymous, so people like tinfoil hats don't get out. But prescribing data is public, and that not public. You can go buy it. You can see broadly how like which physicians anonymized, like the characteristics of physicians who tend to prescribe certain drugs. Does that make sense? So it's like it's all anonymous.
Type of doctor.
Exactly. Well, not even I don't even think like, I don't even know how specific it gets to where they are, because then you could probably figure out who they are. But it's kind of like voter targeting data. Like at no point did the Obama campaign know who I was necessarily, but they knew that people who were like me did Facebook certain things, and so they would target me or not target me. Yeah, Facebook ads, same deal. Like it's not me, it's anonymized. It's like so how they do that is because it's like, for these drugs, you would not run a Super Bowl ad for them. Yeah, because you're just like yelling into the wind. So you want to go target these types of physicians with like speakers bureaus, which is like speaking engagements, and then even some like kind of not door to door, but like pharma rep stuff. If you had a reasonable degree of certainty who was like more likely to prescribe these drugs. So what they were doing was pretty cool, in that they were helping physicians learn about these drugs. Physicians only really know about these drugs if you tell them. They're not just like walking around with
sales
like a
don't just
Rolodex
happen.
of drugs in their head. Yeah, exactly. So it was this very targeted approach to informing physicians about the options that were there for their patients who have these like rare diseases. And to be clear, like I don't think they dealt with like there was no opioids were involved or anything like that. But it was like that's basically what they did. And I feel comfortable saying that because I'm pretty sure that's all it's just
Cool.
data driven,
Cool.
targeting. So yeah, I'll have to after this. I'll look on their website, make sure it's on their website because I'm pretty sure that's all public.
If everyone listens, this is all public. These are just value bombs.
Yeah, I mean that's just how it works. Like I'm not getting any numbers here, but like so it's pretty cool just learning about pharmaceutical services companies and how you can get to how drugs get to market and all the ways that people are finding more efficient ways. Because like, we hear a lot of bad things about pharmaceutical companies, but there's still a lot of good stuff out there that helps people.
That reminds me of basically like when oil drillers, I mean, most wells that they dig will come up empty, or a lot of wells will come up empty. Now it's getting better with like improving technology and the drills can now move sideways. But like, it's just like with drugs, like there's gonna be a lot of failure. There's gonna be a lot of unknowns. Like, so it's interesting that company took kind of we're going to be good at the marketing aspect. It sounds like we're going to use data and do very good at marketing.
Yeah. And this is they just took marketing techniques and applied them to pharma services. And I think there's more than one company that does that. And so, it's nothing inside baseball here, but it was cool learning about that application for
I love
pharma services.
You kind of harp on something. This is the wonderful thing about pivoting and dabbling in your 20s is that you can see where one thing applies in one domain and then transfer it to another one. Like you said, like if I can learn this in math, I can also learn this for iBanking. Like I've learned how to learn. It's a meta skill. You know what I mean? So
yeah, just the pattern recognition stuff. Like what helped me conceptualize what they were working on was when I worked on political campaigns and thought about voter targeting and cluster analysis and things like that. I was like, oh, this is basically the same thing. And so it was very easy for me to understand it. Whereas some other people who'd never seen that before, they were like, wait, so you do what? Like, how do you, I just got it because it was the same thing. Roughly, just replace certain words.
You've seen it all before. They're like, this guy's a genius. You're like, no, I've done it. Like,
more or less done it before.
So we covered iBanking. That's for morons, obviously. Tell me about you like how I like to denigrate my guests.
It's fine. It was very tiring.
You mentioned we talked a few days ago. You mentioned about carbon accounting. So what are you working on with that?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that world.
Yeah. So I work for Iconic Air right now. We're an upstream, right? We work with energy intensive industries right now. We're very focused on oil and gas. It's a carbon accounting platform. Emissions accounting, I should say. And we help right now oil and gas companies measure, manage, and reduce their carbon emissions. And so why that's relevant is recently in the news, I mean, a lot of the climate tech stuff is really popping off because we're looking at a lot of these climate change deadlines coming up where scientists tell us if we don't keep warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, then bad things will happen. Regardless of what anybody thinks about that, I generally think it's like more data, more information is good as long as it's not super onerous to collect. And so what we do is we provide a platform that makes it less onerous to collect that data. So you look at where this comes into play. There was a lot of talk about this before, but whereas people started to really get there's more of a sense of urgency was the SEC proposed rulemaking where public companies would have to disclose their scope 1, 2, and I think 3, anyway, their carbon emissions. It's proposed rulemaking, so it's not final yet. but you would essentially create a 10K for your emissions. And since you're, just spilling stuff out into the commons, like I generally, even as like a pretty free market guy, I think it's a good idea. It's like you are polluting. Like I think the investors have a right to know what is your exposure to any kind of pollution related regulation that comes down the
investors
pike.
want to know about risks.
Yeah. And
dude, do you think even this 10K, this carbon 10K, you think you can get on Edgar one day? Edgar, for the audience, is a SEC search database to look up companies, the 10K, 10Q, the 4 whatevers, to look up all their documents. Do you think one day there'll be a carbon on the Edgar, a carbon document on Edgar?
Yeah, I think so. It'll be some kind of like, I don't know, C12, like an S1 or like a 10K or a 10Q. Like it'll just be a something. Yeah, like it'll be a CQ, like you'll file it quarterly or something, and it'll tell your emissions intensity and your absolute emissions but what we do, so it's not just reporting. This is cool, but what we do, it's not just helping you at the reporting level. Think of it like QuickBooks, right? Like you report your earning. Companies report their unit earnings don't use QuickBooks, but if they did, because QuickBooks is what most people know of, QuickBooks helps you drill down to the expense level of where you're spending money. So we can drill down to the asset level of where you're emitting. So if you have any kind of problem areas, we can tell you where that is. So it's more for performance. So it's like carbon performance management, as opposed to just reporting, which is kind of what we've had with other legacy systems and what people need to do, have had to do with the EPA.
I love that because that means they can make changes. They can see the data. Oh, here's our dump trucks make 50,000 tons of carbon. How do we switch out our dump trucks or find efficiencies? It finds the cost drivers for the carbon, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's more cost effective ways to do that now. Like in the past, people relied on emissions factors, which are just like correlation coefficients in equations. So just multiples of things. And then sensors have been developed, but like it's just cost prohibitive to put sensors on everything. And I mean, I don't know the science behind it, but I imagine like edge computing's not quite there. It's all very expensive. So what you can do then is kind of a hybrid of the two, where you might have, say you have like 10 compressor stations, you can put sensors on 1 or 2 of them and then extrapolate out what the emissions are for the other 8 based off of developing your own custom emissions factors. Whereas before you were just using kind of like, it's like for the accounting nerds out there, it's like depreciation, right? Like you have certain accepted, like I don't know, a laptop lasts 3 years or whatever, but like doesn't really last. It's like the difference between, it's a difference between your depreciation schedule and the actual life of that. Like what's it actually doing versus what you actuarially think it's doing.
Okay.
So you can have more of an actual life or emissions estimate now versus just a rough back of the napkin, which was directionally correct. But when you're getting evaluated on it by investors who have their own books to report of their financed emissions, then you want to be more than directionally correct. It's like being directionally profitable. Right. That's not helpful to
That'll be kind of interesting because it feels like BlackRock or these different institutional investors are big on like pushing towards carbon accounting. So it feels like that should drive demand for services such as yours, I assume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of pull from them. I mean, absolutely. They're a big driver of demand for this kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. So it's, the timing seems to be right. I mean, climate tech's doing very well. Oil and gas is doing very well. So, we're really excited for,
love it. And what's the name of the company again?
Iconic Air. Our website is iconicair.io, or find us on LinkedIn. Give us a sub, because I have to get our LinkedIn subs up.
You got to start some content marketing. You probably already doing some content marketing, I assume.
Yeah. We're doing a decent amount. We've got a blog. We are starting to do kind of white papers, things like that. But we're small. We only have 13 employees. And so a lot of us wear a bunch of different hats.
I love it. And you're learning a lot. What would you like to leave us with? I don't want to take up your whole day. What is there any surprise or sayings or curses you'd like to leave us with?
No curses, I will say. I just, for sake of wrapping up, went and looked on anyway. I was looking at the deal I just described in their first paragraph.
Okay.
That's what I just said. So it's fine.
Yeah,
I'm just worried about, I don't want to expose any secrets, but I'm pretty sure it's all general stuff.
Anyway, it's perfect. Yeah.
Perfect. Can't wait for this to go viral. Say, I don't know. I would say just like, I don't want to hold myself out there as like some, pivot master, but it's just, I said, growing up, 2008, 2007, saw a lot of people who had spent their whole life like not really learning how to pivot. I'm not knocking them. Like I'd say it's however many, 70, 80% of people out there. So just, I would leave everybody with, take a look at books like Ultra Learning and just stay curious and don't get pigeonholed. And then you'll be, and even if anything, like you'll be just way less stressed about pivoting or way less stressed about your job prospects. Like when I was working in the Senate, it was the only thing I knew how to do. I was like, I didn't even know what else I would do. And now I've got like 30 other things that I feel like I could probably comfortably go do. And I'm just way less stressed about my job prospects.
Because you have optionality. So, you have optionality, you have connections, you have skill sets, multiple. So you're good. Well, if you ever flame out, you can always crash on my couch. I could, you could just clean my apartment for me and you could stay here for free if you need.
See, I know how to do that because at the Citadel, I got a degree.
But I need it to be clean every Saturday.
I basically got a degree in home maintenance.
I love it.
See, damn, you walked right into that one.
Thanks, guys. Bye.